The waiting room smelled like new carpet and cold coffee, and it was 9:02 on a Saturday morning. I sat with a navy folder in my lap. Metal clasp. I didn't open it. Across the room, my wife checked her lipstick in the black mirror of her phone. She had a hair appointment at 11. She thought she was here to sign something that made her executor of everything I owned. She was half right. Someone was about to be signed out of something. My wife told me not to come to her big night. She said I count pennies? She said the people who'd be there count buildings. She was right about the counting. She was wrong about the pennies. There were 72 of them in that folder. 72 little reasons, going back 6 years. She thought a man who spent 38 years measuring bridges couldn't count past 2. I want you to understand something about me before we go any further. I never once raised my voice about any of this. Not in the car. Not in the bathroom mirror. Not here. The angrier I get, the quieter I get. By 9:02 that Saturday, I was about as quiet as I have ever been in my life. But let me back up. This started 6 years ago, with a dollar amount so small I almost let it go. Welcome to my channel. Get settled, because this one is going to take you somewhere. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to love it here. My name is Walter Kessler. I'm 63 years old, and for 38 of those years I was a civil engineer in Bakersfield, California. County roads, drainage systems, 2 bridges over the Kern River. Both bridges are still standing today. I refuse to let anybody round a number up to make a Friday deadline. I'm not telling you that to impress you. I'm telling you because it matters later. Every single bit of it matters later. Here's what 34 years of marriage and 38 years of engineering will teach a man. If he's paying attention, everything has a load rating. Steel does. Concrete does. People do too, though nobody wants to say that part out loud. I drive a 1999 GMC Sierra with 211,000 miles on it. Every spring I put it up on ramps in the driveway and retorque everything myself. A machine you maintain tells you the truth. A machine you neglect tells you lies, right up until the day it kills you. For 6 years running, I got up at 5:40 in the morning to drive my grandson Cole to 6:20 swim practice at the Y on Ming Avenue. His parents work early shifts. Somebody has to be in the bleachers with a thermos of coffee. On the 1st of every month, $400 goes into an account for his college. I have never once mentioned it at a family dinner. The day you announce a kindness out loud is the day it stops being one. When my neighbor Ruth's sump pump gave out 2 winters ago, I fixed it myself and only let her pay for the part, $11.40. She still brings me tomatoes every August like she owes me a debt. She doesn't. I want you to understand something about me before this story gets complicated. None of what happens next is about the money. It never was. It's about what a person does with 34 years of trust, and what it costs when they spend it without asking. Here's one more thing you need to see before we go on. In the glove box of that Sierra, wrapped in a shop rag, there's a bamboo slide rule. My father gave it to me in 1974, the day I passed my engineering boards. I carry a calculator in my shirt pocket like everybody else on a job site. I still check the important numbers on that slide rule first. It has never once lied to me. Remember that it's in the glove box. I should tell you about the paperwork too, because Diane always did, usually to a room full of people, usually with a laugh in her voice. Back in 1988, a county audit tried to pin a cracked culvert on my crew, a culvert I had flagged as defective before it was ever poured. The only thing that saved my license that year was a stack of dated field notes I'd kept out of pure habit, notes nobody had asked me to keep. Ever since, I write things down. Dates. Amounts. Who said what and when. Diane called it my paperwork disease. I called it Tuesday. I owned exactly one suit for 30 years. Diane referred to it, generously, as the suit, the way you'd refer to a dog that only knows one trick. My wife's name is Diane. She's 61. We've been married 34 years. I loved her for probably 30 of them without once having to think about it. The way you don't think about breathing until somebody puts a hand over your mouth. The last 10 years, something shifted. Not all at once. Nothing that matters ever happens all at once. Diane found a new crowd out at the Vale Arts Foundation, the kind of people who say, "We summer," instead of, "We go on vacation." Galas. Committees. A wealth advisor named Gil Pruitt who called her visionary, in a tone that made my back teeth hurt. I became the man who parked the car and waited by the coat check, and for a long time I told myself that was fine. A marriage doesn't owe you excitement after 3 decades. Only steadiness? I thought the distance between us was just years piling up, the ordinary weather of a long marriage. I hadn't yet checked the bank account the way I check a load rating. If I had, I'd have found the first crack 5 years earlier than I did. It was a Tuesday. 6:10 in the morning. I was at the kitchen table with my coffee and my phone, trying to move $2,000 into Cole's college account before the deposit deadline on Friday. I tapped confirm. The screen blinked back, transfer declined, insufficient funds. I read it twice. Then I laughed, actually laughed, because that account had never once been short in 34 years. I figured it was a bank error. Banks have errors. I finished my coffee and drove to the branch on Stockdale Highway when it opened at 8:30. Marge Ostrander has worked that branch for 19 years. She knows my signature better than I do at this point. I told her what happened, and she pulled up the account without a word, the way people do when they already suspect what you're about to find. "Mr. Kessler," she said, "there's nothing wrong with the account. It's just low." I asked her to print the statement. Then I asked for the last 12. I stood at that counter and I counted. 1, 2, 3. Small numbers at first, nothing that would trip an alarm on its own. $600 here. $900 there. $1,200 one month, right around Christmas. Every one of them going out to the same place, month after month, going back. Marge had to pull 3 more statements before I found where it started. 6 years. Every single transfer carried the same 2 words, Sister's Medical Fund. I want you to stay with me here, because this part matters. Diane has one sister. Carol. And as far as I knew, walking out of that bank at 9:15 that morning, Carol Fedderson was healthy as a horse. I didn't call Diane from the parking lot. I drove home. I put the statements in a drawer. I waited for that night, because whatever this was, I wanted to ask about it standing up, in a room with good light, where I could watch her face. She was getting ready for a foundation dinner when I brought it up, standing at the bathroom mirror, doing something complicated with an eyelash curler. Already half a world away from me, in a green dress I didn't recognize. "How's Carol's health?" I asked. She didn't even turn around. "Fine." "Why? Since when?" That got her attention. She turned around holding the eyelash curler like a small tool she might need to defend herself with. I told her, plainly, what I'd found at the bank. I didn't have the real number yet, that came later, but I told her enough. She didn't deny it. She didn't explain it either. She did something worse. She sighed, the way you'd sigh at a child who found the Christmas presents early. Then she told me it was complicated, and grown up, and none of my business the way I thought it was. Then she said the thing I'd come to hear, whether I knew it yet or not. "Don't come Saturday, Walter. You count pennies. These are people who count buildings." I didn't say anything for 3 seconds. I counted them. She must have read something in my face, because she softened it, or tried to, the way people do right after they've said something they can't take back. "Wear the suit if you want," she said. "Just let me have my night." "All right," I said. That's the whole conversation. 4 words was all I had in me, and 4 words was plenty. Here's what you need to understand about how I'm built. I don't yell. I never have. When something in me breaks, it doesn't make noise, it goes quiet, the way a live wire goes quiet right before it finds ground. Something hot went very, very still in my chest, standing in that bathroom doorway. Cold, actually. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay there next to a woman I'd been married to for 34 years, listening to her breathe, running the numbers the only way I know how. Slowly. More than once. I wasn't angry. Anger is loud, and it's fast, and I've spent 38 years around live current and heavy equipment. The most dangerous thing in any room is never the thing making the noise. I wasn't angry. I was done. And a done man does one thing an angry man never does. He doesn't slam a door. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't say one more word about it at breakfast the next morning. He starts keeping receipts. The next morning, I drove to the branch and asked Marge for something she never had to print for me before, every statement on that account, going back 6 years. She didn't ask why. She's the kind of woman who understands that some requests don't need a reason attached. I sat at my kitchen table for the better part of 3 days. A yellow legal pad, a stack of statements, and my father's slide rule for the moments I didn't trust my own arithmetic. I didn't call Diane. I didn't raise the subject again. I just counted. 72 transfers. 6 years. $87,000, give or take 40 cents. Every one of them labeled the same 2 words, Sister's Medical Fund. I want you to sit with that number for a second, because I had to. $87,000 is not a mistake. A mistake is $40 you forgot you spent on parking. $87,000, moved in 72 careful pieces over 6 years, is a plan. If you've been listening for a while, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. It costs you nothing and it means everything to us. Hit the like button while you're at it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. I couldn't do the next part alone. Not because I needed muscle. I needed somebody who'd let me think out loud without trying to fix anything. That's Ike Brennan. 31 years we worked county surveys together, him running the rod, me running the numbers. He retired the same spring I did, and neither one of us has figured out what to do with the Tuesdays since. I called him on a Wednesday morning and told him I needed a ride, and I needed him not to ask why until I was ready to tell him. "You want the long way or the fast way?" he said. "The careful way," I told him. He didn't ask another question for 2 days. That's Ike. The careful way started with a phone call to Carol. I told myself it was for her birthday, 3 weeks early, the kind of thing a brother-in-law does when he's feeling sentimental. What I was really doing was listening for a cough, a mention of a doctor, anything. I got 40 minutes of Carol talking about her garden, her knees, which were fine, thank you, and a cruise she and her husband were planning for the fall. I asked, careful as I could make it, whether she and Diane had talked much this year. "Not really," Carol said. "Maybe twice. You know how she gets busy." I sat in my truck in Carol's driveway for a long time after I hung up. 6 years? 72 payments. A sister who wasn't sick, who barely talked to Diane, whose name had been sitting on a fiction the whole time like furniture nobody remembered buying. That's the part that still gets me, more than the money ever did. She didn't just take from our account. She spent her sister's name to do it. Ike knew a lawyer. Not a friend exactly, a man Ike had done a land survey for once, years back, who'd been square with him the whole time. In Ike's book, that counts for more than a friendship. Harlan Reyes kept an office off Truxton Avenue, a law degree on the wall, and a coffee maker that looked older than both of us. I laid the statements out on his desk in order, the way I used to present as-built drawings to a county inspector. Harlan didn't say much while he read. When he finished, he sat back and looked at me over his glasses. "Walter," he said, "this isn't a leak. This is plumbing." I asked him what he meant by that. "A leak is an accident," he said. "Plumbing is designed. Somebody built this on purpose, and they built it to run quiet for a long time. The question isn't whether your wife took the money. You already know that. The question is what she was building toward." He asked for a week. He wanted to pull a few things, title records, mostly, and a look at any recent filings under her name or her sister's. I told him to take whatever time he needed. I'd learned the value of patience the hard way, more than once in my career, and now once in my marriage. The call came on a Thursday. Harlan asked me to come in, and I knew from his voice that whatever he'd found, it wasn't small. He had 2 documents on the desk when I sat down. The first was an escrow disclosure for a condominium in Scottsdale, Arizona, $18,000 down, buyer of record Diane Kessler, no co-signer. The second was a moving company estimate, dated for the Monday after her retirement gala. I looked at both of them for longer than I needed to. Long enough that Harlan spoke first. "Walter," he said, "I don't think this was ever about a party." Neither did I by then. I sat in that office and did the arithmetic one more time, out loud, for Harlan and for myself. 6 years of careful transfers. A sister's good name spent like currency. A condo 2,000 miles away with her name alone on the paper. A moving truck already scheduled for the Monday after everyone raised a glass to her. She wasn't stealing to stay. She was stealing to leave. And she wanted me right there in the house while she did it, quiet, unsuspecting, counting pennies at the kitchen table, while she counted down the days. The next 2 weeks, I did the kind of work nobody sees and nobody thanks you for. Harlan and I built it the way I used to build a case file for the county, dated, sourced, boring. 29 folders, each one holding a certified copy of a statement, a highlighted line, a running total in my own handwriting on a cover sheet. Marge certified every page herself, initialed and dated because I asked her to. By then, she understood exactly what she was helping build. Boring wins? I learned that on job sites 40 years before I ever needed it in a divorce. Most nights, Ike sat across the table without saying much, sorting statements into date order while I built the totals. 2 old surveyors, 1 legal pad, 40 years of habit between us. He never asked why I hadn't confronted her again. He already knew the answer. Some things you don't announce. You build them. Harlan called me in on a Tuesday with news I hadn't expected. My father's inheritance from 2019, the house he left me in Tulare, the account that came with it, plus everything I'd saved before Diane and I ever married. None of it had ever touched a joint account. $310,000, sitting exactly where I'd put it 30 years ago, entirely mine under California law. "You kept it separate the whole time," Harlan said. "Most men your age fold everything into the marriage without thinking twice. You didn't." I told him I hadn't done it on purpose, not really. I just never saw a reason to move it. Old habit. The same habit that made me photograph a cracked culvert in 1988. Harlan gave me the closest thing to a smile I'd seen on him yet. "Old habits are the only kind that hold up in court, Walter." We drafted it that week. An irrevocable trust, funded entirely from the separate $310,000, split 3 ways for Cole and his younger cousins, Theo and Ruby. Released for education only. Administered by Harlan's firm. Alongside it, a new will. And one more document, a demand for reimbursement of $43,500. That was the portion of Diane's 72 transfers Harlan traced directly back to my separate funds, not our joint ones. Money that was never legally hers to move in the first place. I sat across from Harlan's desk while he explained the mechanics, twice, slowly. The way I once explained load calculations to a young engineer who needed to actually understand the number, not just sign off on it. I asked him every question I had. He answered every one without once making me feel foolish for asking. That's how I knew I'd found the right man for this. At home, I kept living the life Diane thought I was still living. On a Thursday, she found me in the garage. Breezy as anything, she told me we needed to sign the estate paperwork before Saturday, so everything's tidy for the accountant. What she meant, though she never said it plainly, was the consolidation agreement that made her executor of everything I owned. "Of course," I told her. "Let's do it at Harlan's. Saturday morning? 9 o'clock. She smiled at me like I'd finally come around. She thought she'd won. She had no idea she just agreed to walk into the exact room, at the exact hour, where I'd already built the case against her. 2 mornings later, Over breakfast, she told me to cancel the extended warranty on the truck. $40 a month, Walter, honestly. We don't need that. $87,000 had left our accounts over 6 years, and she was worried about $40 a month on a truck I maintain myself. Good idea, I said. I poured her coffee. Let that sink in. Harlan found something else in the fund records that week, something I want you to hear, even though it never went anywhere in a courtroom. The Sisters Medical Fund had a second signer on it besides Diane. A name I recognized, Gil Pruitt, her wealth advisor. The same Gil Pruitt whose name sat 2 lines below hers on the Scottsdale escrow paperwork. I don't know everything that was between them, and I'm not going to guess out loud about the parts one can't prove. What I know is what the paper says. His name was on her money. His name was on her exit. That's enough for me to understand who these people she wanted to impress really were. I drove home that afternoon and sat in the truck in my own driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside. Didn't turn the radio on. Didn't check my phone. Just sat there with my thumb running along the edge of my father's slide rule. I stayed until I felt steady enough to walk through my own front door and ask her how her day was. The second thing came in the regular mail, of all places, a routine notice from the insurance company I'd paid premiums to for 11 years. Diane had changed the beneficiary on my $150,000 policy. Not to the kids. Not to a trust. To her own estate. I didn't fight it. I didn't call the company and demand it back. The trust Harlan and I had built already dwarfed that number by more than 2 to 1. She was moving pawns. I was moving the board. The mover's estimate was what finally set the date for me. The truck was booked for the Monday after her gala, which meant whatever I did had to happen before that truck showed up in my driveway. I called Harlan and confirmed Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, ahead of the gala that evening. Then I called Carol. I told her I needed her to come sign one family document with me. Nothing complicated, I said, just something that would put her mind at ease about a few things. I didn't tell her what. I didn't have to lie to get her there. I just didn't tell her everything yet. By Friday night, I had 2 witnesses lined up for a Saturday morning meeting neither of them fully understood. A folder with 29 tabs in it, alphabetized and dated. A wife upstairs steaming a green dress for a party I already knew wouldn't happen the way she'd planned. I hadn't raised my voice once through any of it. Not once, in 2 weeks of building the quietest, most patient thing I have ever built in 38 years of building things. Saturday morning, 9 o'clock sharp, in a conference room off Truxton Avenue that smelled like fresh coffee and printer toner. Rain from the night before still sat in beads on the window behind Harlan's chair. Harlan sat at the head of the table, jacket on, the way a man dresses when he wants a room to understand he takes it seriously. His paralegal, a quiet young woman named Denise, had a stack of documents squared in front of her and a notary stamp within reach. Carol sat to my left, still not entirely sure why she was there. She turned a pen over in her hands, like it might explain itself if she looked at it long enough. I sat across from an empty chair and didn't say much of anything. I'd had 3 weeks to say everything I needed to say. This part wasn't for talking. Diane walked in at 9:04, 4 minutes late, and not the least bit sorry about it. Already half-dressed for the gala that night under her coat, hair done, jewelry on, phone still in one hand. She couldn't put it down long enough to shake anybody's. She dropped into the chair across from me like she was doing us all a favor by showing up at all. "Let's make this quick," she said, reaching for the pen in front of her before anyone had said a word. "I have a hair appointment at 11. Harlan didn't rush. He never does. He opened a folder, not mine, not yet, and started with the document she was expecting. "Before we get to the estate consolidation," he said, "there's a will to review first. Walters." He read it aloud, calm as a man reading a grocery list. $310,000, separate property, moving into an irrevocable trust for Cole, Theo, and Ruby. Education only. No provision for a spouse, current or former. Diane's smile didn't move. Not yet. She was still waiting for the part where somebody handed her a pen and a title. She glanced at her phone once, checking the time, already halfway back out the door in her head. Then Harlan slid the second folder across the table. 29 tabs, dated top to bottom. This one's about the transfers, he said. 72 of them. $87,000 over 6 years. Every one marked Sister's medical fund. I watched the color leave her face like water draining from a glass. Slow at first. Then all at once. Her phone was still in her hand. She set it face down on the table without seeming to notice she'd done it. You counted on me not reading, I said. She looked at Carol. Carol looked back at her, and I want you to understand, I hadn't told Carol a single number before that morning. She'd read the folder herself, in the 5 minutes before Diane walked in, sitting right there at that table. Her face went through the same slow collapse mine must have gone through, weeks earlier, at a bank counter on Stockdale Highway. I was never sick, Diane, Carol said. Quiet. Not a question. Diane's mouth opened and nothing useful came out of it. She reached for an explanation the way a drowning person reaches for anything floating. Something about investments. Something about protecting the family. Walter, you never wanted to hear about any of this. Something about how I'd never understood money the way she and Gil understood it. Something about how I'd always been comfortable being small, and how somebody in this marriage had to think bigger than a pension and a paid-off truck. Harlan let her talk. Denise kept her eyes on her notepad. Nobody interrupted. Villains always talk longer than they should. I noticed that again that morning, watching my wife of 34 years try to explain 72 decisions in real time. None of them held together. Each new sentence contradicted the one before it a little more. I read everything, Diane, I said. I always have. Harlan set down the last 2 pieces. The reimbursement demand, $43,500, the portion that came out of money that was never legally hers to touch. And underneath it, the escrow disclosure. Scottsdale, Arizona. $18,000 down. Her name, alone, on the buyer line. Nobody said anything for a moment. Carol looked at the escrow paper, then at her sister, and something in her face closed like a door being locked from the outside. 29 years of being somebody's little sister, and this was the morning it stopped. Diane finally found her voice, and it came out smaller than I'd ever heard it in 34 years of marriage. Walter, I can explain the condo, you don't have to, I said. Harlan already did. I stood up. I closed my own folder, the navy one, the one that had been sitting in my lap since a waiting room this whole story started in. I left the pen exactly where it was, on the table, in front of her, next to the will she'd never get to sign the way she'd planned. The gala's Saturday, I said. Don't be late. I walked out past Denise, past the coffee machine older than both Harlan and me, out into a parking lot still wet from the night before. Carol followed me out a few minutes later, her keys in one hand, and didn't say a word the whole way to her car. I didn't slam the door on my way out. I didn't need to. Some doors closed loud enough on their own. Here's what it cost her, in numbers, because numbers are the only thing that never lies to you. $310,000, my separate property, moved permanently into an irrevocable trust for Cole, Theo, and Ruby. Diane will never touch a dollar of it. Not this year. Not in 20. The Scottsdale condo financing collapsed within the week, the moment the lender pulled updated financials. $18,000 in deposit money gone. Non-refundable, the way these things usually are for people in a hurry. She signed the reimbursement agreement 17 days later, at Harlan's office again, this time with her own attorney beside her. $43,500, on a payment schedule, going back into the account it never should have left. The life insurance beneficiary reverted to the children as part of the settlement. Gil Pruitt, I never did learn everything about him, and I still don't need to, stopped returning her calls. Around that same time, the Vail Arts Foundation quietly uninvited her from the spring committee. People who count buildings, it turns out, don't much care to be seen next to a scandal. I filed for divorce that Tuesday. The papers were served at 6 that evening, at the house, while she was packing a bag she hadn't told me about yet. 11 missed calls came in that night. I let all 11 ring out. I called her back exactly once, the next morning, and said exactly one sentence. "Carol's not the one you should be calling." I hung up before she could answer. Here's the arithmetic of the whole thing, side by side, because I think it matters. She reached for $87,000 over 6 years. It cost her access to $310,000. It cost her an $18,000 deposit she'll never see again. And it cost her $43,500 she now has to pay back, with interest. She counted pennies too. She just counted the wrong ones. Word got around the family the way it always does, slow, then all at once. Cole asked me, carefully, whether the college money was still coming. I told him it always had been, and it always would be, and that part of this had never once been in question. The Saturday the trust papers were finalized, Theo came over after his baseball game, still in his socks, cleats left by the front door the way his mother taught him. I took the slide rule out of the glove box and set it on the kitchen table between us. "What's that?" he asked. "Something my father gave me," I said. "Watch. 7 times 8. I showed him how to line up the marks, slow, the same way my father showed me in 1974. Theo frowned at it for a minute, then slid it himself, and landed on 56. "It doesn't even have a battery," he said, delighted, like he'd caught the thing doing something wrong. "That's the best part," I told him. He asked if he could keep it. I said yes before he finished asking. Some things you build to outlast you. I'd stopped checking for a while, whether my marriage was one of them. I never once stopped checking that boy's math. Concrete cracks from the inside long before you see it on the surface. So do marriages. So do people. You learn to read the hairline before it opens, if you're paying attention, and if you're honest enough to look. An engineer doesn't guess. He measures twice and signs once. I measured for 6 years. I signed once. Theo still keeps that slide rule on his dresser. No battery. Never needed one. If you enjoyed this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. I will see you on the next one.